A desperate escape. In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, a vicious rebellion raged against the tyrannical Zorban Empire. Leading the insurgency was Princess Aria Starsong, a fierce warrior with an unyielding spirit. Born into the royal family of Zoria, Aria had witnessed firsthand the cruelty and oppression inflicted by her father, Emperor Zorgan, upon their people. Determined to overthrow her father's despotic regime, Aria rallied the rebels, leading daring raids against imperial strongholds. Her bravery and tactical brilliance soon made her the face of the rebellion, a beacon of hope for all those who yearned for freedom. But the Emperor's wrath knew no bounds. In a brutal battle above the planet Sandar, Aria's ship was critically damaged by Imperial fighters. Alarms blared and sparks flew as the crippled vessel spiraled out of control, plummeting towards the barren, inhospitable surface of Sandar. Aria, gravely wounded, crawled from the smoldering wreckage, her silver skin marred by deep, pulsing lacerations. Blood, glowing an ethereal blue, seeped from her wounds, staining the red sands. She knew her injuries were severe, perhaps fatal without prompt medical attention. But help would not come. Emperor Zorgan, enraged by his daughter's betrayal, ordered his forces to abandon her on Sandar, leaving her to perish alone and in agony. To the Emperor, Aria was no longer his child, but a traitor to be made an example of. As Aria lay dying under the scorching alien sun, a small spacecraft approached, stirring the dust as it landed nearby. Out stepped a human, a man with weathered features and piercing blue eyes that spoke of a life of hardship and conflict. His name was Jack Hawkins, a former soldier turned explorer, drawn to Xandar by the unusual energy signatures from Aria's crash. Jack had seen his share of war and loss, the scars etched into both his body and his soul. Though he had left the battlefield behind, the instinct to help those in need, even a stranded alien, still burned strong within him. Gently, Jack gathered Aria into his arms, carrying her back to his ship. He laid her on a medical bunk, his brow furrowed with concern as he took in the extent of her injuries. Though his knowledge of alien physiology was limited, Jack set to work, cleaning and dressing her wounds as best he could. Hours passed, and Aria drifted in and out of consciousness, her mind a haze of pain and fragmented memories. In her fleeting moments of lucidity, she found herself staring up at the human, his features etched with concentration as he tended to her. When Aria finally awoke fully, she found herself lying in a small but clean room, her wounds bandaged and the pain reduced to a dull ache. She tried to sit up, wincing at the effort, as Jack entered the room. "Easy there," he said, his voice a soothing rumble. "You've been through quite an ordeal. It's a miracle you survived it all." Aria eyed him warily, confusion and distrust warring within her. She had been taught from a young age that humans were a primitive, inferior species, scarcely worth considering. Yet here was one who had saved her life, tending to her with a gentleness she had seldom known. "Why did you help me?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Jack met her gaze, his eyes soft with understanding. "Because it was the right thing to do. I couldn't just leave you there to die." Aria was taken aback by his simple, honest answer. In the cutthroat world of galactic politics she had grown up in, such altruism was rare, almost unheard of. As she recovered, Aria and Jack began to talk, tentatively at first, but with growing openness. Jack shared stories of Earth, a planet Aria had only heard of in passing, and the wars that had shaped him into the man he was. Aria, in turn, spoke of Zoria, once a shining jewel of the galaxy now reduced to a shadow of its former glory under her father's rule. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, a bond began to form between the princess and the soldier, two souls adrift in an uncaring universe. Aria found herself drawn to Jack's quiet strength and unwavering moral compass, while Jack was inspired by Aria's fierce determination to fight for what was right. But their respite was not to last. Emperor Zorgan, informed of his daughter's survival, was furious. He dispatched his deadliest assassins to Xandar, with orders to finish what the crash had started. Arya and Jack soon found themselves under siege, forced to rely on each other for survival. As the assassins closed in, the princess and the soldier prepared for a fight that could very well be their last. They were two warriors, forged in the fires of different worlds, but united by a common cause. Together, they would stand against the darkness, ready to defy an empire and reshape the galaxy. Their battle was just beginning, but with Arya's courage and Jack's unwavering resolve, they would face the trials ahead not as alien and human, but as partners, bound by a friendship that transcended the stars, forging an alliance. In the days that followed, Arya and Jack worked tirelessly to repair her damaged ship, scavenging parts from Jack's own vessel and the wreckage scattered across the harsh Thunderian landscape. It was a daunting task, but one they tackled with grim determination. As they labored side by side, Arya's initial wariness of the humans slowly gave way to a growing respect and admiration. Jack's resourcefulness and technological prowess, honed by years of solo exploration in the unforgiving void of space, were unlike anything she had encountered before. He had a way of looking at problems from angles she'd never considered, finding solutions where others might have given up. Jack, too, found himself increasingly impressed by the alien princess. Arya's quick mind and adaptability were astounding, her ability to grasp new concepts and skills almost superhuman. Despite the hardships she had endured, there was a resilience to her, an unbreakable core of strength that Jack couldn't help but admire. In the brief moments of rest between their labors, Arya and Jack shared more of their histories, each tale a thread in the tapestry of their growing bond. Jack spoke of his childhood on Earth, of green hills and blue skies, so different from the stark landscapes of the worlds he'd traveled since. He told her of the wars that had torn his planet apart, the conflicts that had molded him into a soldier and set him on the path to the stars. "I fought for a cause I believed in," he said one night as they sat beside a flickering fire, the wreckage of Arya's ship looming behind them. "But in the end, I couldn't save the ones I loved most. I lost everything. That's when I left Earth behind, hoping to find, I don't know, some kind of purpose out here among the stars." Arya nodded, understanding in her eyes. She, too, knew the pain of loss, the weight of responsibility. She told Jack of her own world, Zoria, a planet of towering crystalline cities and vast, shimmering seas. She described the beauty of her home, but also the suffering of her people under her father's iron fist. "I was born into privilege," she confessed, her voice tight with emotion. "But I couldn't stand by and watch as my father's cruelty destroyed everything I loved. I had to fight, even if it meant turning against my own blood." As they shared their stories, Arya and Jack began to see in each other a reflection of their own struggles, their own hopes and fears. They were two souls shaped by the fires of adversity, driven by a shared desire to make a difference in a galaxy that often seemed cold and uncaring. And as they talked, a plan began to take shape. They couldn't stay on Sandor forever. It was only a matter of time before the Emperor's forces tracked them down. But neither could they run forever. If they wanted to truly make a difference, to bring an end to the Emperor's tyranny, they would need to fight. "We could rally the rebellion," Arya suggested, her eyes sparking with renewed determination. "With your skills and my knowledge of the Empire's weaknesses, we could strike at the heart of my father's power." Jack considered the idea, his brow furrowed in thought. It was a daunting prospect, taking on an empire that spanned galaxies. But he had seen firsthand the cruelty of the Emperor's regime, the suffering it inflicted on countless innocent lives. And in Arya, he saw a leader worth following, a warrior with the courage and conviction to see this fight through to the end. "All right," he said at last, meeting her gaze with a resolute nod. "Let's do it. Let's take the fight to the Emperor and give the galaxy a chance of freedom." And so, on that barren, windswept world, an unlikely alliance was forged. A princess and a soldier, an alien and a human, bound together by a shared purpose and an unbreakable bond of friendship. Together, they would become a force to be reckoned with, a beacon of hope in a galaxy shrouded in darkness. But their path would not be an easy one. As they made their final preparations to leave Xandar, a new threat emerged from the shadows. The Emperor, it seemed, was not content to let his daughter slip away so easily. He had sent more than just assassins after her. He had unleashed his most fearsome weapon, a monstrous cybernetic creature known as the Dreadnought. Half machine, half living nightmare, the Dreadnought was a being of singular purpose, created to hunt down and destroy the Emperor's enemies. It was relentless, unstoppable, and it had caught the scent of its prey on Xandar. As the ground shook with the heavy tread of the approaching monstrosity, Arya and Jack knew they faced a fight unlike any they had encountered before. But they did not flinch, did not falter. They had each other, and the strength of their bond would see them through this trial as it had all the others. Side by side, the princess and the soldier readied their weapons, prepared to stand against the nightmare that hunted them. Their battle against the Empire had begun, and they would not rest until the galaxy was free. The Dreadnought's pursuit. The Dreadnought's arrival on Xandar heralded a new level of danger for Arya and Jack. The monstrous cyborg, a nightmarish fusion of organic tissue and advanced technology, had been created for a single purpose: to hunt down and eliminate the Emperor's most dangerous enemies. And now it had Arya firmly in its sights. Standing at over 3 meters tall, the Dreadnought was an imposing figure, its body a gleaming mass of metal and synthetic muscle. Its face, if it could be called that, was a blank, featureless mask, concealing whatever horrors lay beneath. In place of hands, it had an array of vicious, interchangeable weapons: plasma cannons, razor-edged blades, and other implements of destruction. As the cyborg's heavy footsteps shook the ground, Arya and Jack knew they had precious little time. They'd hurried to finish their repairs on Arya's ship, working with a desperate intensity. Every moment counted, for they could feel the Dreadnought's approach like a physical weight, a shadow looming ever closer. "It won't stop," Arya said, her voice tight with tension as she rewired the ship's power core. "My father's creations never do, not until their target is destroyed." Jack, his hands deep in the ship's propulsion system, nodded grimly. He had faced many foes in his time as a soldier, but nothing quite like this. The Dreadnought was a monster out of a nightmare, relentless and utterly without mercy. But they couldn't let fear consume them. They had a mission, a purpose that was greater than their own survival. The fate of the galaxy, of countless lives crying out for freedom, depended on them. With a final, desperate effort, they completed their repairs, just as the Dreadnought came into view on the horizon, a glint of metal under the harsh Xandarian sun. Its weapons were already charging, the air crackling with the buildup of deadly energy. "Go, go," Jack shouted, rushing Arya into the ship. They blasted off, the force of their acceleration slamming them back into their seats. Behind them, the Dreadnought opened fire, lances of searing plasma scorching the air where their ship had been mere moments before. They tore through Xandar's atmosphere, the Dreadnought in hot pursuit. It was fast, faster than any organic creature had a right to be, and it kept pace with them easily. In the skies over Xandar, a deadly game of cat and mouse unfolded. Arya, her hands flying over the ship's controls, jinked and weaved, trying to shake their pursuer. But the Dreadnought was relentless, its weapons carving paths of destruction through the void. "We can't outrun it," Arya said through gritted teeth, sweat beading on her brow. "We need to find another way." Jack, manning the ship's weapons, had an idea. It was risky, perhaps even suicidal, but it might be their only chance. "The asteroid field," he said, pointing to a dense cluster of space rocks ahead. "We might be able to lose it in there." Arya hesitated for only a moment before nodding. It was a gamble, but one they had to take. With a sharp tug on the controls, she sent their ship hurtling into the treacherous maze of asteroids. It was like flying into a storm of rock and metal. Asteroids whipped past them, some as large as mountains, others no bigger than a fist. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and they would be smashed to atoms. Behind them, the dreadnought plowed into the field, its bulk smashing through the smaller asteroids, its weapons blasting the larger ones to fragments. It moved with a terrible, single-minded purpose, an unstoppable force of destruction. Arya flew like a woman possessed, her reflexes pushed to their limit as she threaded the ship through the narrowest of gaps. Jack, his eyes locked on the rear scanners, fired the ship's weapons at any asteroid that looked like it might cross their path, trying to clear a way. It was a heart-stopping, breathless dance through the void, a balance on the knife's edge between life and oblivion. Every second stretched into an eternity, every near miss a brush with death. And then, miraculously, they were through. They burst out of the far side of the asteroid field, battered and shaken but alive. Behind them, the dreadnought emerged a moment later, its armor dented and scorched, but its pursuit unrelenting. But they had gained a precious lead, a few moments of breathing room. It was enough for Arya to punch in the coordinates for a hyperspace jump, to send them hurtling away from Xandar and into the unknown. As the stars stretched into lines around them, as the dreadnought disappeared into the distance, Arya and Jack allowed themselves a moment to breathe, to process the nearness of their escape. They had survived, but they knew this was only the beginning. The dreadnought would not stop. The Emperor would not rest. They had made themselves targets of the most powerful force in the galaxy, and now they had to fight. For their lives, for the lives of all those who suffered under the Emperor's rule, they had to find a way to win. As their ship hurtled through the void of hyperspace, Arya and Jack began to plan, to strategize. They would need allies, resources, a way to strike at the heart of the Empire. It would be a long and difficult road, fraught with danger at every turn. But they had each other and the strength of their bond. They had the hope of a galaxy yearning to be free. And so into the unknown they flew, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, ready to fight until their last breath for the chance to bring light back to the stars. Part 4. Gathering Allies. Emerging from hyperspace, Arya and Jack found themselves in a far-flung corner of the galaxy, a sector known for its lawlessness and chaos. Here, far from the watchful eye of the Empire, all manner of outcasts and rogues scratched out a living on the fringes of civilized space. It was the perfect place to start building their resistance. They set down on a seedy spaceport on the planet Taurus, a world of towering city-states and seething undercities. As they stepped out into the perpetual twilight of the port, they were immediately assaulted by a cacophony of sights, sounds. Copyrectry-Claude's response was limited as it hit the maximum length allowed at this time. And smells. Vendors hawked their wares from ramshackle stalls, the sizzle of exotic meats mingling with the acrid tang of starship fuel. Beings of every species and description thronged the narrow streets, each going about their business with a wary eye and a hand never far from a weapon. Arya and Jack moved through the crowd with purpose, their eyes scanning the faces around them. They were looking for contacts, individuals who might be sympathetic to their cause. Arya, with her knowledge of the galactic underworld, had a few ideas of where to start. Their first stop was a dingy cantina nestled deep in the heart of the spaceport. The air inside was thick with smoke and the tang of cheap alcohol. The patrons hunched over their drinks with the wary posture of those who expected trouble at any moment. In a shadowed booth at the back, they found the man they were looking for. He was a Zorelian, a member of Arya's own species, with the same silver skin and ethereal features. But where Arya carried herself with the regal bearing of a princess, this man had the hardened look of a seasoned guerrilla fighter. His name was Zek, and he was the leader of a small but fierce band of rebels who had been waging a guerrilla war against the Empire for years. They struck from the shadows, sabotaging imperial installations, disrupting supply lines, and fomenting unrest on occupied worlds. Zek listened intently as Arya laid out their plan, his eyes glinting with a mixture of curiosity and cautious hope. The idea of striking directly at the heart of the Empire, of rallying the scattered rebel cells into a united force, was an audacious one. But he could see the potential, the chance to finally make a real difference. "It won't be easy," he warned, his voice a low rumble. "The Empire's grip is strong, and many have tried and failed to break it. But they didn't have what we have," Arya countered, her gaze fierce with determination. "They didn't have the knowledge of an Imperial insider or the skills of a warrior from beyond the stars." She laid a hand on Jack's shoulder, a gesture of trust and partnership. Zek's eyes flicked between them, assessing, calculating. Finally, he nodded. "All right," he said. "I'm in, and I can put you in touch with others who might be willing to join the fight. But we're going to need more than just fighters. We need ships, weapons, supplies. And for that, we're going to need credits. A lot of credits." Arya and Jack shared a look. They had anticipated this, the need for resources to fund their nascent rebellion, and they had a plan. Their next stop was a towering skyscraper in the heart of Taris Financial District. Here, amid the gleaming offices and bustling trade floors, fortunes were made and lost every minute. And here, if their information was correct, they would find the second piece of their puzzle. Her name was Vala, and she was a master hacker and information broker. With a few keystrokes, she could infiltrate the most secure databases, siphon credits from the richest coffers, and topple corporations with a well-placed leak. She was also, according to Arya's sources, no friend of the Empire. They found her in a lavish penthouse suite, surrounded by the latest in computer technology. She was a striking figure, her skin a deep cobalt blue, her eyes glinting with the light of the data streams she manipulated with a thought. Vala listened to their proposal with a cool, appraising gaze. Hacking the Empire's financial network, diverting funds to support the rebellion, was a tall order. It would require all her skill, and the risk was immense. But the challenge of it, the chance to strike a blow against the hated Empire, was too tempting to pass up. "I'll do it," she said, a sleek smile playing across her lips. "But I'll need access to Imperial codes, high-level security clearances, the kind only an Imperial insider would have." Arya smiled, a fierce, predatory grin. "That," she said, "I can provide." And so, piece by piece, the foundation of their rebellion began to take shape. With Zek's fighters and Vala's financial wizardry, they had the beginnings of an army and the means to support it. But they would need more. They would need the support of the people, of the countless worlds groaning under the Empire's yoke. Their next stop was a small, unassuming world on the edge of Imperial space. Nemia was a planet of farmers and laborers, its people hardy and independent. They had suffered under the Empire's rule, their crops seized, their children conscripted into the Imperial war machine, but they had not forgotten how to fight. Arya and Jack met with the leaders of the Nemian resistance in a hidden bunker beneath a sprawling farmstead. These were no soldiers or politicians, but simple people driven to fight by the injustices they had endured. They listened to Arya's words with the hunger of those who had waited a lifetime for a chance of freedom. "The Empire has taken everything from you," Arya said, her voice ringing with passion. "Your lands, your children, your dignity. But they have not taken your spirit. They have not taken your will to fight. And now, with your help, we have a chance to take back what is ours. To build a galaxy where no one lives in fear, where no one is a slave. Will you fight with us?" The answer was a resounding yes. And with that, the spark of rebellion began to spread. From world to world, Arya and Jack traveled, gathering allies, building their network. They found support in the most unlikely of places: a hidden Jedi enclave, a rogue Imperial admiral, a pirate queen with a fleet of stolen ships. Each new ally brought new strength, new hope. But even as their movement grew, so too did the challenges they faced. The Empire, alerted to the growing unrest, tightened its grip, cracking down with brutal efficiency. Bounty hunters and Imperial agents dogged their every step, forcing them to stay constantly on the move. And always in the shadows, the dreadnought lurked. The monstrous cyborg, single-minded in its pursuit, was never far behind, a constant reminder of the stakes they faced. But Arya and Jack would not be deterred. They had set their course, and they would see it through to the end, whatever that end might be. For the chance to bring light back to the stars, to give the galaxy the freedom it deserved, they would risk everything. And so, with their ragtag army of rebels and renegades, they'd prepare for the fight of their lives. The Empire was mighty, its power seeming insurmountable, but they had something the Empire could never understand: the courage of those with nothing left to lose, and the unbreakable bond of those united by a dream of a better tomorrow. The stage was set, the pieces were in place. The Galactic Rebellion had begun, and its fate would be decided in the battles to come. The Battle of Zoria, the time had come. After months of careful planning, of gathering allies and resources, Arya and Jack were ready to launch their most daring strike yet. Their target, Zoria, Arya's homeworld, and the seat of the Emperor's power. It was a risky gambit, a direct assault on the heart of the Empire, but it was also an opportunity, a chance to strike a blow that would resonate across the galaxy. If they could liberate Zoria, if they could show that even the Emperor's stronghold was not invulnerable, it would inspire hope in the hearts of all those who yearned for freedom. The plan was audacious, a complex web of feints and diversions designed to spread the Empire's forces thin. Zek and his fighters would lead a series of hit-and-run attacks on Imperial outposts, drawing attention away from Zoria. Volo would use her hacking skills to sow chaos in the Empire's communication and control systems, blinding and confusing their foes. And Arya and Jack, leading a hand-picked team of their most skilled and dedicated fighters, would infiltrate the royal palace itself. Their objective: to capture the Emperor and force him to abdicate his throne. It was a plan fraught with danger, dependent on split-second timing and no small amount of luck. But it was also their best chance, the culmination of all they had worked for. As their small fleet dropped out of hyperspace on the outskirts of the Zoria system, Arya felt a mix of emotions warring within her. Fear, certainly, for the scale of what they were attempting, but also determination, a fierce, unquenchable resolve to see this through no matter the cost. Beside her, Jack was a steady presence, his face set in lines of grim determination. He caught her eye, gave her a nod of reassurance. They were in this together, come what may. The first phase of the plan unfolded like clockwork. Zek's fighters struck their targets with precision, drawing out the Imperial fleet, pulling them away from Zoria. Valda's cyber attacks sowed confusion and disarray, the Empire's once orderly systems descending into a mess of contradictory commands and false alarms. And then it was their turn. With the Imperial defenses in chaos, Arya and Jack led their team in a daring drop-pod assault directly onto the grounds of the royal palace. They hit the ground running, blast of fire erupting around them as they charged forward. The palace guards, caught off guard by the audacity of the attack, fell back in disarray. Arya and Jack pressed forward, their team fanning out behind them, securing key objectives with practiced efficiency. They burst into the throne room, weapons drawn, ready for anything, but what they found stopped them in their tracks. The Emperor was waiting for them, seated on his throne with an air of calm, almost amused detachment, and beside him, looming like a nightmare made flesh, stood the dreadnought. "Ah, my wayward daughter," the Emperor said, his voice a cold, mocking drawl. "I wondered when you would find your way home." Arya's grip tightened on her blaster, her jaw clenched tight. "Your reign is that of a father. The galaxy will no longer suffer under your tyranny." The Emperor laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You always were a naive child. Do you really think you can stand against the might of the Empire? Against me?" With a gesture, he sent the dreadnought forward. The monstrous cyborg moved with terrifying speed, its weapons already glowing with deadly charge. The battle that followed was a whirlwind of chaos and destruction. Arya and Jack fought side by side, their weapons blazing, their skills pushed to the absolute limit. Around them, their team fought with desperate courage, facing down the Emperor's elite guards. But the dreadnought was an enemy unlike any they had faced before. It shrugged off blaster fire like rain, its own attacks devastating in their power. One by one, Arya and Jack's companions fell, until only they were left, battered and bloodied but unbroken. In a final, desperate gambit, Arya launched herself at her father, her blaster forgotten, her hands reaching for his throat. The Emperor met her with a sneer, his own formidable powers rising to meet her. As father and daughter grappled, Jack faced down the dreadnought alone. It was an unequal contest, a lone human against a monster designed to destroy armies. But Jack would not yield, would not give an inch. With a cry of defiance, he charged forward, his blaster spitting fire. The dreadnought met him head-on, its massive fist slamming into him with the force of a meteorite. Jack felt ribs shatter, felt the taste of blood in his mouth, but he did not fall. Somehow, through a haze of pain and desperation, he found a weakness, a tiny flaw in the dreadnought's seemingly impenetrable armor. With the last of his strength, he drove his blaster into that flaw and fired, pouring every ounce of his will into the shot. The dreadnought staggered, sparks and smoke pouring from the hole in its chest. It lashed out, a final, desperate attack. But Jack was already moving, rolling clear as the cyborg collapsed, its systems failing, its monstrous life extinguished. Across the room, Arya and the Emperor were locked in a titanic struggle, the air crackling with the energy of their clash. But as the dreadnought fell, the Emperor's concentration wavered for just an instant. It was enough. With a final mighty effort, Arya broke her father's hold. Her hands closed around his throat, her face a mask of righteous fury. "Yield," she growled, her voice low and deadly. "Yield or die." For a long, tense moment, the Emperor's eyes blazed with defiance. But as he looked into his daughter's face, as he saw the unyielding resolve there, something in him seemed to break. His shoulders slumped, his powers fading. "I yield," he whispered, the words bitter on his tongue. And with that, it was over. The Emperor was taken into custody, his rule ended at last. Across Zoria, across the galaxy, news of his fall spread like wildfire. In the streets of 1,000 worlds, people cheered and wept, their long nightmare finally at an end. But for Arya and Jack, the work was just beginning. There was a galaxy to rebuild, wounds to heal, a new order to create. It would not be easy, but they would not flinch from the challenge. As they stood amid the ruins of the throne room, battered but victorious, Arya turned to Jack. Her eyes shone with a mix of emotions, exhaustion, relief, and something deeper, something that had grown between them over the long months of their struggle. "We did it," she said softly, her hand finding his. "We really did it." Jack nodded, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes, we did. Together." And that, in the end, was what mattered most. Not the battles won or the enemies defeated, but the bond they had forged, the trust and care, and maybe even love that had grown between a princess and a soldier, an alien and a human. Together, they had brought hope back to the stars. Together, they would build a new future, a galaxy where all beings could live free and in peace. It was a daunting task, but one they would face as they had faced everything else, side by side, hand in hand, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. The battle was over. The war was won. But for Arya and Jack, for the galaxy they had fought so hard to save, the real work was just beginning. And they were ready to build the future they had dreamed of together. The end.